Morning peeps, welcome to another vlog. Today we're starting a touch early, just like in the last vlog. What we're about to do is we're gonna head out to the mechanic, drop off a car. Afterwards, we have a bathtub installation, which is something I haven't shown in a very long time on this channel. And we're doing it in a condominium, which is a little bit different from doing it inside a house. And I'm gonna explain all that a little bit later. But let's get some breakfast in us. You know what to do. Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. I'm gonna start with the good news. I had a steep tea and 3 chocolate Timbits and I'm feeling fine. The bad news is we are back in the truck because the moment we decided to start, we ended up trying to shut off the valves to the unit, and the hot water valve was passing, which means that we couldn't shut it off. So the building needs to call its own plumber, shut the building down, replace the valves, and then we'll be able to actually get in and replace the bathtub. But in the meantime, that's not gonna happen till at least a week from now. So we are off to another job site. I think we're diagnosing a leak. When we get there, we are gonna see. That's sort of the game plan when you are a service plumber. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. Let's get to the next job site and see if we can make a pretty decent video out of this already, you know what I'm saying? So peeps, we're actually at a building we normally service, and what we noticed was there's a leak happening in the parking garage right down here. As you can see behind me, that puddle right there. So there's a bathtub upstairs right above this that seems to be leaking. Now the difficulty with bathtubs is there are a few areas that the leak can actually occur in. So it's a little bit tricky to diagnose exactly where it's coming from and then what to do subsequently because of that. So right now what we're doing is basically troubleshooting to figure out what exactly this leak is being caused by. So peeps, I wanted to show you on the whiteboard what sort of difficulties you'll run into when dealing with bathtubs and troubleshooting leaks with them. So peeps, this is a picture of what a bathtub looks like. So you have your bathtub here, you're done leveling it, then you got to connect its drain. The bathtub has a shoe which will eventually run into a trap, and it also has an overflow which will eventually run into a trap as well. As the trap continues on, you will eventually have a back vent which will shoot up and go into another vent which goes up to open air, and then the drain continues on into the sanitary system, into a stack usually, which will take it out to the sewers, which will eventually go to the water treatment plant. As well as this, you have accompanied with it water lines that come in, that come up to a shower control valve, which will allow you to put water into the bathtub, choose your hot and cold, which will distribute into the downspout as well. When you pull up a diverter, it will eventually go up into the shower head, and then you shower from there as well. The difficulty with bathtubs is just the amount of variables involved as to where the leak can take place. So, just on the drain side, the bathtub itself can have a leak from the shoe over here. It could have a leak from where the overflow is on top. It could have a leak from the rest of the drain, and that's the difficulty with ascertaining where the leak is with the bathtub. But on top of all of that, you also have the water supply lines that come in, and the water supply lines themselves themselves might be compromised, you have your hot and cold coming in, and you have to check for both of those if either of those are leaking. A couple of areas that you gotta know is that the spout or the toe test for a shower a lot of times malfunctions, and instead of water shooting this way into the bathtub, it actually shoots backwards towards the wall. So sometimes when you turn on your water, you will actually have a leak behind your wall because the spout is causing this little situation to happen where water shoots backwards rather than forwards. If you move up to the shower head, sometimes the shower head does something similar as well. So what I'm trying to say is that every time you meet a bathtub that you have to troubleshoot, it's always going to be a lot of difficulty, but here's a couple of tips. First and foremost, we look at the bathtub and see the state of the tiles and the grout around it. A lot of times the grout and the caulking around the bathtub are one of the biggest reasons why the leak is occurring. We came into a place one time where the grout around the tiles had completely fallen off, so when people take showers and the water sprays off of them into that area, the water seeps in behind and you start seeing drips to the bottom floor below. Then we have to work on isolating the shoe, which is filling up a bucket and putting it into the shoe to see if it leaks there. If that doesn't happen, then we go up to the overflow. We send water down and we spray water into the overflow to see if that's causing a leak. If that doesn't happen, then we check out the shower control valve and see if there's any difficulty with that, and that's basically the protocol when dealing with bathtubs. Alright peeps, so I got cut off before because the battery died. Essentially what's occurring right now is we got an emergency call, which is a drain call. What's occurring is that the bathroom and the vanity are clogged inside the washroom of these units. But what we found out recently was that water is actually coming out of both the bathtub and the toilet, even though that this washroom isn't being used. So that's a really big indication of a really big problem. So we're running out there right now in the middle of the evening. It's about 6 o'clock right now. We were home a bit earlier today, so we're gonna head there. I'm gonna take you along with me. Let's check this out. So peeps, this drain call that you're about to see is something that happens rarely to us, but it's a really fascinating situation in general, so I'm really happy we get to see it and talk about it. What essentially happened is we got called in by the superintendent of this building, and the gentleman said that the washroom was clogged. So every time the tenant ran the faucet in the vanity, water would come up into the toilet and also into the bathtub, and vice versa. They were all connected, and that meant a communal pipe for them was actually clogged. So we thought to ourselves, okay, no problem. What we'll do is we'll come in first thing in the morning, we'll unclog it for you, and you're good to go. Got a call about an hour later, and the superintendent said, no, you guys gotta come now because water is still filling up inside the bathtub and inside the vanity, even though nobody's using it in that unit, which was a huge red flag for us, which means we had to get there ASAP in order to get this job done. And I want to explain to you on the whiteboard what exactly is happening. Alrighty peeps, this is the situation we're dealing with at this job site that we're at. So here's a building, and I just want to show you typically what we have in a building. You have a sanitary stack coming down, turning into a 90, which will eventually go out into the manhole outside, which is the sanitary drainage system, which will eventually be taken to a water treatment plant. As you see the stack move up each floor, you're going to have a bathroom group. This is a shower P-trap, which will be wet venting a vanity, which will wet vent into the toilet, and the toilet will eventually connect to the stack. As you come up for the vanity, you do have a vent running above into the venting system, which will eventually go up to open air, and then you have the exact same setting on the second floor above, and above this stack goes up to open air. So here's what's happening. We were told initially that the bathroom was clogged, so when somebody ran the vanity, water came up into the bathtub. So in our minds, we're thinking to ourselves, okay, if you run the vanity drain and the water comes up into the bathtub, that means that the water is not escaping and it's actually traveling up the drain rather than down the drain in the direction it's supposed to drain. So for us, that tells us that this entire drain is clogged right now, and it's clogged further down, probably somewhere where the toilet is. So if it's clogged here, what you'll notice is water will build up, it will come back up the drain, all the way up the shower, and it'll also travel up the vanity as well, and that's why you're seeing it in the washroom. Now the good thing about that sort of setup is that if you just stop running water in that bathtub or in that washroom, you're not going to have a problem at all. Here's what eventually occurred though. We were told that even when they don't run any water, water starts to come up in their washroom as well. And that was a huge red flag because that means that it's actually the stack that's clogged rather than the bathtub itself. What does that mean? That means that instead of the clog being right here where I drew it before, it's actually on the vertical section or the horizontal section down below, which means that now when people run water, this water is traveling up through all these pipes. It's coming out into the bathtub, into the vanity, and if the water gets even worse, it'll start traveling even further up into this stack until it gets to about flood level rim where water will start coming out onto the floor. Now, here's the big problem that you have in front of you. The difficulty now is, now this entire stack is completely full of water. So if you were to open, let's say, a clean out, on the bottom floor below right here, if you were to open up a clean out, all this water inside this pipe is now gonna come out onto the floor. Splash works will happen on the bottom floor because the entire stack is getting clogged with water. So now it's crucial for us to actually start above the clog. What does that mean? That means we know that the stack is clogged up till here because the water is coming out of the floor below. But we also know that the floor above isn't having that difficulty at all. So that's exactly where we have to go to send our snake into so that we don't do this below, which has caused an entire mess. So that's one thing you got to keep in mind. You got to go upstairs into the floor above, start snaking from there. So that's exactly what we did. We went up and we took our K1500 all the way upstairs into the floor above, and we started snaking the drain, and as soon as we hit it, we could actually hear the water draining from the floors below. But here's the difficulty you got to remember. The K1500 is a really strong, it's also a really heavy drain machine. So when you send the snake through the toilet flange and it goes down below, you got to imagine you have 2 or 3 lengths of coil that are now in complete free fall down this pipe right here until it hits whatever the clog is. And the more snakes you put onto it, the heavier the thing actually becomes. And there have been lots of cases where it gets so heavy that the plumbers let go for a second and that entire snake falls down the stack and into the drain, and then it's a really arduous process in order to find it and take it out. And from what I hear, there are cases where plumbers can't even take them out at all.